Unleash the power of knowledge and connect with the heartbeat of the African diaspora. Download our African Diaspora News Channel app now on Google Play and Apple App Store. Stay informed with authentic and diverse perspectives, breaking news, and cultural insights. Immerse yourself in a community that celebrates unity, resilience, and progress. Experience the vibrancy of the diaspora at your fingertips. Don't miss out. Empower your perspective today. Search African Diaspora News Channel and join the conversation.
President Emmanuel Macron is firing back, and he's not playing. He is angry. He is not happy with African leaders, and he's saying that African leaders are not grateful. He goes ahead to say that if it wasn't for France, African countries wouldn't be where they were. He goes to say that actually African leaders forgot to say thank you to him. And he adds that if it wasn't for France, peace, security, stability, as some of these African countries know it, would not have existed. Things are about to get heated in the kitchen. Hello there, how are you doing? Welcome to another episode of our conversations. My name is Ondiro Oganga. I'm a business journalist by profession and a digital content creator. I love coming on here, having conversations with you guys about Black people, Africans, our empowerment, and how we can rise up and take our rightful place at the global stage. I want us to get into today's video because it's really, really interesting. Let me lay some background for you. So France has been on the African continent post-colonization, and they have quite a deep influence on the African continent. There's this thing called France-Afrique, where there are relations on the political front, economic front, and even social front. And there has been a lot of criticism about the kind of grip that France has, particularly on former French colonies, right? The main language of communication is French. Some of their money is still held with the central bank in France, and access to it is really difficult. There was a time France was asking African countries to pay for the infrastructure that was developed pre-colonial and during the colonial period. So you're definitely paying someone for colonizing you. And there has also been questions about the presence of French troops on the African continent, particularly West Africa. And this doesn't do anything to help the situation. It's not calming the tension. It's not reducing insurgency. If anything, problems just continue. And there has been growing anti-French sentiment because Africans are asking themselves, why do we need this kind of relationship when it's not mutually beneficial, when it's not symbiotic, when we're not partners and equals, when it's a replay of the colonial relationship that we had, now under the disguise of democracy, freedom, and elections, yet you get to control each and every single aspect of our lives. And this is something that has been spoken a lot by so many African scholars and critics of the way that France is running its relations on the African continent with different African countries. And in the recent years, we've seen many of these West African countries begin to cut ties with France. For example, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso. Once there were coups in these African countries and military leaders took charge, they cut ties. Then there's Chad. Chad was one of their last remaining partners, particularly for France and also for the United States of America. And what Chad did is it said, we don't see any benefit from having these military bases on our soil, and they cut operations with them. Now, this was really tragic because this was like their last standing base, and Chad just says that that relationship is obsolete. They see no value from it. And then now we have Ivory Coast that recently announced that they want to do a joint and organized cessation from having military bases, particularly French military bases in the country. And then Senegal also followed suit and said they want to craft almost a new strategy of security and military partnerships. But then again, President Bassirou Faye goes on to say that Senegal is a sovereign country, and sovereign countries do not have to host foreign military bases. And if you look at the nature with which France was relating with Francophone West Africa, a big part of that relationship was France having military presence in those countries and almost some form of security agreement. Now, France says that they've been working with these African countries, and rightfully so, give them credit where it's due, because there has been insurgencies, there's been a lot of attacks, so many people, thousands have lost their lives, hundreds of thousands have lost their homes. And it's just an area that is a hotbed for insecurity. And so that is why French forces joined to help these military governments fight insurgencies. They were in Chad, they backed the government when militia were trying to take over and there were coup attempts. So in France, in the eyes of France, they've been a good partner to Africa. And so when Africa began cutting ties, it's almost as if France finds itself in very unfamiliar territories and they don't know where to go because it takes years to cultivate these relations. And we saw China has been courting the African continent, Russia has been courting the continent, Turkey, Italy, the US, and France, for a better part, focused a lot of his attention on Francophone Africas and French-speaking countries. And now, because there's this revolt, France almost feels like they don't know what the way forward is. They don't know what the next step is. And that's where the tiff comes in. So President Emmanuel Macron, while speaking, got really, really, really agitated and was saying that African countries forgot to thank him. African countries forgot that without France, there wouldn't be sovereignty as we currently know it on the African continent. And he goes so far to say that it's just ingratitude because French soldiers have lost their life fighting on the African continent. But then again, African governments have fired back. But before that, listening to what he had to say.
We had a secure relationship. In truth, it was in two parts. One part was our commitment to fighting terrorism since 2013. We were right. I think some have forgotten to say thank you, but that's okay. It'll come in time. I'm in a good position to know that ingratitude is a disease that cannot be transmitted to humans. But I say this for all the African governments who've not had the courage in the face of public opinion to bear it, that none of them would be in a sovereign country today if the French army had not been deployed in this region.
So after President Emmanuel Macron made those remarks, we've seen the president of Senegal reacting. Chad has also reacted, and even military leaders are reacting because, first of all, those remarks are perceived to be very unpresidential. They're not statesman-like. His tone, his mode of presentation, whatever agreements or disagreements they have, these were things that were done very privately, and the announcements were made in a very diplomatic manner. So that rant, many African leaders feel was uncalled for. And many of them just feel like, this is our country. You have no right to dictate to us whether you stay or not. You're here courtesy of our invitation. And when we feel like the time is right to ask you to leave, then you should honor the sovereignty of our land, like the president of Senegal was saying, and leave. But it looks like there's going to be some sourness. Will this affect the relationship? Not quite, because France still needs to assert some form of influence on the African continent. This is just an anger outburst. If you ask me, it will pass. They're going to go back to the table. They're going to talk. And even though these military troops are leaving, I think they're going to find a new way of striking security partnerships, maybe where now the troops will be training local military, exchange programs, knowledge exchange, as opposed to them having military bases in their countries. African leaders have just gotten to a place where they want the continent to belong to Africans, and they want the full freedom to make decisions that impact the daily lives of their people.